Hi, I'm Jason,
I'm Randy.
and we wanted to talk a little bit today about a project we're working on. It's a game called Cyclotronica, and this is Cody, by the way. She may or may not, you know, she has a lot to say. Sometimes she may disappear from the frame. Who knows? We'll see if she'll give us the floor here. But this is our cockatoo. She's a rescue, and she's quite the personality. But anyway, so we've been working on a game for the last couple of years called Cyclotronica, and Randy here, this is my dad, and he's kind of taught me how to code over the course of this whole project, and he came to me with an idea in 2019.
Yeah, we had just finished. I'd done a historic monument sculpture in Buckhead, the Great Fish, and it had been designated a historic monument, but had been damaged quite a lot by pigeons and stuff. So we worked like several months restoring that and came off it, and we're looking for a project to do. And I wanted to get back to software because boy, I wore my arse out doing that thing. But so I had this project, Cyclotronica, which is I first wanted to make. I had this gyrocycle that I made during another game, so I robotified it, and I was going to kind of like do a Tron kind of racetrack, stick to the wall, stunt riding game.
Tunnel Runner, like old Sewer Shark for the Sega CD, or like, it's like that would probably be the closest thing I could think of off the
And it
top of
was
my head.
originally just a thing for a hand, an eye device where you sit there and you tilt, and it was going to stunt ride down tunnels, and it'd have cool graphics flying by you like the special effects on the movie. And then I said, well, I'll call it Cyclotronica because it's a gyrocycle. But then I got the idea it should collect protons, neutrons, and electrons and make a table of chemical elements. So I put all that together, but it wasn't quite enough, and I kept like thinking how to extend the gameplay. So I brought it to him because I know he's like a real good modder. He's the type that'll spend 4 days making the 18-wheeler drive up the side of an apartment building in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, we called it Stephen Hawking's Pro Skater. Because I mean, what do you do? They eventually, I think, God, who was it? It's either like Worst Buy or Teenage Stepdad on Instagram finally made Stephen Hawking Pro Skater this year. That just became a meme. I've been talking about it since 2010, so thanks. But no, he came to me with this really crazy like mono wheel cycle design, and it's kind of the big wheel where you sit in the middle is an unusual type of motorcycle, and I rank it just above the sidecar motorcycle, where you put the lion with the machine gun in the passenger seat. Those are really great too. I always like seeing those. But so the mono wheel is just a great cycle idea. Although to be fair, I gave him the let's collect the subatomic particle stuff, but he came to me with this whole aesthetic and this name, and so I mean, it was kind of nice because it was a shoe in right off the bat. He was like, yeah, it's called Cyclotronica, and I'm like, well, all right, well then let's put him in particle accelerators. Let's put him in like inside a nuclear reactor. Let's put him in a tokamak. Let's put him in something that does fusion. Let's put him in something where we're holding a singularity and containment for testing. And so that's what we kind of sort of embarked on that, where it was like we had a design idea already because that was what he brought to the table. So we needed to build gameplay around the aesthetic.
Right. So the deal with game development is you need to get a base mechanic and have it work well and be fun. So I had a real good gyrocycle. You could do slide siding, side sliding, drifting, and like all kind of motorcycle stunt stuff, and it would ride up walls if it was tagged as the proper layer, which we call navigable surface. And so that was cool, and of course you have to do something like collect something and obstacles and all that. So when I tossed it to him, he started formulating this whole thing and doing lots of research on all the elements and how things combine and all of that.
Thank you, Wikipedia. Thank you, Dynamic Periodic Table. That's an amazing little website tool. I had to do a lot of comparing because no one place actually has all of the authoritative info on especially elements that are more recently discovered. Like listings of isotopes are not necessarily all complete everywhere. there can be outdated information on stuff because it changes so rapidly now, especially with like all the research that's being done in meta and nanomaterials and stuff like that. We didn't know what half of these lanthanides and actinides did until recently, and we still don't know most of what they do. And so that kind of stuff, it's like you really do have to compare sources. Even when your citations are good, you still need to pull them all together. So that whole idea where it's like, all right, let's put it in a cyclotron, let's like ride around and use that. It's like, well, we need to have some measure of realism, enough that we can represent things to people. If you draw stuff to scale, it just doesn't work.
No, so it became like an iconography type thing. So like, for example, we're designing a level and, you know, we're figuring a lot of these apparatus or copper. So we're instantiating fluorine-19 atoms, and the device has gone haywire, so he's the Mr. Big, who has got to go in and he's got to use lithium bullets to target all the rogue fluorine atoms and turn them into a lithium crystal so that they're no
Which is
lithium salt.
And that's, you know, it's a basic, that's the kind of thing you get in middle school, high school science class where they're like, here's an ionic bond between two atoms. And it's just a nice little way of demonstrating like a basic scientific concept,
right.
You know.
And so instead of doing the actual structure of the lithium crystal, we just make a lithium crystal icon.
So
you know, two pyramids pushing against each other.
Yeah, a little octahedron. You know, it's like a D8 in Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody's seen the shape, you know. So he mentioned Mr. Big a second ago. I guess I kind of wanted to go over. We decided as part of the whole, like, all right, we're gonna build gameplay around this. He's gonna run around and get the little particles, and you know, he's gonna shoot stuff out with the science gun. And so we were like, all right, we got to make it all kind of make sense. How do we substantiate, like, because all games are kind of silly. So like, what can we come up with to sort of underwrite the concept of this little robot running around inside the cyclotron? So we were like, so it's the latest and greatest in first-person, third-person scientific experimentation and observation technology, and it's Mr. Big, which stands for Miniature Infinitesimally Stable Tachyon Enveloped Reconnaissance and Boson Influx Gyrometer, Mr. Big for short. I always thought it was funny because, you know, like Mr. Big in old cartoons is like, oh, he's the mob boss, and then you find out he's like 2.5 feet tall behind the desk and he's sitting on phone books. So it's like, Mr. Big, and then he goes in the really tiny places or whatever. And he uses the science gun, which is mounted on the front of the monowheel, and as you collect your subatomic particles and you get to inventory, the science gun can then reconfigure their state or
it's like it stores the spin and the moment of inertia and its baryonic information. And it can reconfigure that into various weapons or probes that it can use in gameplay to eliminate like aggressive atoms
or for utility. You can use them to do experiment stuff like you know, spending your electrons to create an X-ray flash so that you can get information on an atom. For instance, that's in one of our synchrotron levels. You roll through and you try to X-ray everything, and some of the things are dangerous and other things you're just trying to get a look at them. And so you can use it as an instrument. You know, it's not necessarily a weapon, but it's all under the guise of the science gun, which is the spin coalescing integral energy and coupling emitter. And but it's just, you know, it's we just wanted to sort of take all of that not work that happens at the subatomic level and make it something you can play around with. You know, the gun has modes, and you can change the mode.
Right, and it's, of course, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, you know, because all these science papers and all that, they're always dealing in acronyms, etc. So, you know, you gotta flip your acronyms around and apply some like snafu kind of like foobar, tongue-in-cheek stuff. And we did the same with, like, you know, do we want to dry explain all the species of subatomic particles?
Photons, neutrons, protons, electrons, antiprotons, positrons, all that, you know, so singularity.
Early on, he wrote about one of the subatomic particles. I think it was a positron or whatever, and talking about it's like that guy at the party who's got a really abrasive personality. And I thought, oh, hold on, we got something here. So we got to make a personality for each one of these for people that aren't science minded, but, you know, and give them an analogy an anthropomorphic kind of analogy so that they could understand the characters of these kind of things in an environment with a whole bunch of other
humanizing and making more accessible emotionally, like the scientific study is it's something that you have to do. I feel like there's got to be a way to like bring people to the table when it comes to learning about something with so many intricate details. And so I personally I like the idea of sort of going like the neutron, mild mannered by day, but he's just waiting to snap or cause some kind of, you know, because it's like neutrons going into a fissile atom may cause it to explode, and there's your atom bomb. And so it's like, oh, the neutron, it doesn't have any electrical charge. What do you mean?
But when it has
It's
balance
dangerous.
in a society between the neutrons and the protons, you kind of get a stable version of
Right.
its atomic culture that persists throughout the time frame.
Or like the proton is, you know, it's positive vibes only. It's one of those kind of things where like it's got some mass to it, but it's got a positive charge. Or like your electron, it's like it's the social butterfly. You know, it's everywhere all the time, and you always see him when you're out, but he's always canceling on plans when you try to call him. You know, it's the electron. Like you don't know where he is, but you saw him, and so they're all of those kind of things. And so what we did was villainize antimatter, just for gameplay purposes. The antimatter is
Yeah, you're talking
antimatter
about
is
the-
villainous.
The level boss. That's the concept of the level boss. And the science gun, that's the concept of the let's shoot something, blow it up.
Yeah.
That's that mechanic.
I
Very
figured
popular
I
mechanic.
figured people would be a lot because it's like you can get into some really I like talking about nuclear physics. I didn't get a chance to go to college just because of how things shook out for me, but I like that kind of stuff. I always enjoy I go and subscribe to meme forums, you know, where people have six-figure debt from going to higher education, and they're making memes about their specialty field, like philosophy, botany, science, nuclear physics, all those different kinds of things. I love like the intricacies of people's disciplines, and then the kind of sense of humor they develop on the back end of like, I've been studying this for 10 years, and I can't tell you how stressed I am about this, but here's my joke. And
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. It's fun, it's niche, it's you know, you try to surround yourself with people smarter than you in life so that you can learn something. And I feel like that's one of the best pieces of advice that ever. I don't remember who the quote is, but I don't remember if it's a Ben Franklin or something like that. But either way, like,
So we're talking about bringing in different mechanics. So, you know, okay, we're going around collecting all these things. Well, you got the table of chemical elements. So we started with making a library of scriptable objects, which is like a container that holds data that you can access and change in the editor or on the fly at runtime, and it'll stick. You know, so it was an obvious choice, and then we just call it like the atomic composite acid was an atom.
yeah, and it's how many protons, neutrons, electrons. Does it emit decay particles? What's its half-life? You know, how electronegative is it? Does it have a magnetic interaction? Is it ferromagnetic? Is it diamagnetic? Is it going to repel all magnets? You know, how strong is that? So there's a lot of parameters when you're looking at an atom. There's properties that they all have because of their structure, and so that's one of those things where it's like now we have this kind of record where I've got 3,200 isotopes that we've input into the system. It's basically every one that's ever been discovered and published, and we've got most of the data set, you know, melting points, boiling points, all the other stuff that I mentioned before, and it just gives you this ability to sort of have a leveled list where, like, if the atom was an NPC, so to speak, now it's capable of dropping into gameplay, and it's like, all right, it's uranium-235, it's a decay particle emitter, which means it's radioactive and it has a half-life, and it emits alpha particles, which means when you're in the same area, it's gonna, for gameplay purposes, we're just gonna have it, basically it has a turret and it shoots alpha particles at you and they'll damage you if you get struck, so it kind of, all of a sudden now we have a combat system going on.
Right, but you could overload it with neutrons and blow it up and have it fissile into daughter products.
Yeah, and so then it makes a dice roll, and there's 118 elements in the periodic table, and there's countless isotopes, 3,200 isotopes, so it makes a dice roll, and the actual fission product ranges that you really do see when somebody's operating like a nuclear reactor or a breeder reactor or conducting atomic tests and like looking to see what isotopes are left over after something blows up. That's what we have it do. We have it roll the dice and go like, here's a first order fission product, here's a second order fission product, and here's the chump change that's left over. Like, does it just dump all of its extra like electrons or protons, or like do we get tritium at the end? You know, like when you do long division and there's a remainder. So you get the little atoms too that are like fusion relevant, smaller elements. You know, so we got that kind of stuff set up where it's like the atoms themselves have personality as a result of that, and you can kind of leave them. They have their own inventory system when they encounter particles in the game. You don't have to. You don't have to be the one that shoots them out necessarily. Like, it can absorb neutrons on its own without you, and so it can change isotopes. It may transmute elements depending on how that works. And so yeah, it's kind of like that. And then conversely, when you're talking about like we've villainized antimatter in the game, they have a very similar inventory system where it's like how many particles do you have, except they're measured in negatives, and every time they touch something with a positive count, like another proton neutron combination or what have you, that deducts from their inventory in a positive direction until it reaches zero, and then that's basically getting the kill, destroying the enemy, annihilating the antimatter as they call it,
getting rid of the level boss.
Yeah, so in the game we have Mr. Big running around doing these experiments inside of these high energy environments or what have you, so that we can kind of show people, you know, like it's nothing's like perfectly represented, but it's very much like, yeah, we're gonna run through the particle accelerator. You're gonna pick up neutrons and charge and momentum and electrons and do all of that kind of stuff, and then you're encountering anomalies periodically, and the anomalies are like the antimatter and what it's doing, and so it's going to come for you and try to touch you and kill you basically, and you got to try to get it before it gets you.
Yeah, and it's basically a 90% physics simulation with rules based on the 3D laboratory universe and subatomic physics. But generally, the gameplay is not going to be the same. You're not going to be able to run through and repeat time after time the same scenario. It's going to be different every time, because it's just, if you're in a different place at a different time, different things are going to happen. So you can't lock that down in a microsecond, which makes it a kind of a little bit hard to run a multiplayer system on it. But we're dreaming up some pretty cool multiplayer scenarios, actually. So.
Yeah, we want to do. He wanted to do like a derby level where it's like you have team on team, where because of the way we have the particles work, you get buffs to your gyrocycle when you collect the different particles. So like if you're damaged and you collect a proton, you don't actually get it in your particle inventory. It's just used to heal the cycle, basically repairs the damage. But otherwise you get 1 point of mass, so your cycle is a little bit harder to knock off course. And you get that proton, and the proton adds +1 to your charge, your net charge, so you have like an electrical charge, and then it also sort of doubles as ammo. And at the end of every level you can exchange for new atoms, so you got to get your protons, and then likewise you got to get your neutrons if you want to. Most of the science gun modes that use protons also use neutrons, although there are a few where it's just a straight up hot proton and it fires it out. So you have, when you collect protons, you either get health or you get mass, and it doubles as ammo and gives you electrical charge. When you collect neutrons, you get a little bit more mass than you would from a proton, and it doesn't add charge, but it gives you a slight boost to your max total health, because that's basically what neutrons do inside an atom. Is if they're in the right ratio, they allow the atom to stick together. The only isotope that we know of, the only isotope there is that is stable without a neutron is hydrogen 1, the original, and that there's just no room for it. But deuterium and tritium exist, and they're 1 and 2 per neutron. So as part of the inventory system, it's like one gives you health and charge, one gives you mass and no charge, and they all double as ammo, and then the electrons,
they give you velocity.
Yeah, you get a little bit of engine power, a little bit of extra top speed, and a little bit of your acceleration curve, but basically no mass.
And then you get
negative charge.
You do get some power from the proton, which is a little bit different from velocity. It kind of gives you a higher upper end on the speed that you can go, but it's a factorization. So I take both of those values into accord and do a little bit of algorithmic magic to kind of match them against each other and keep the the weight of the gyrocycle somewhat in tune with its top velocity, but you can get going pretty damn fast. We're working on doing relativistic levels, but some of these things, like we get ideas and stuff like that, but part of this Patreon thing is like, do you people want to chime in and throw some concepts at us that we could work with, given the framework? Because that's
Yeah.
this is kind of like a family project, so we'll probably be messing around with this 10 years from now.
Yeah, and so it's basically this idea that, like, all right, we got a little robot, and we can drop him in these extreme high energy, like technological man-made environments, and use that to set up a gameplay in which you can run around and possibly encounter atoms, other players, or antimatter and devices and other forces and energies, and that's the kind of stuff you're working with, and you just change the settings and
you're either working against the clock or you're running a track and seeing how many of each one that you could collect on the track, and then the victory condition is generally you have to have a certain count of protons, neutrons, and electrons, so that you can exchange them in the element inventory system for the particular element, and the element should have something to do with the level lore, if you will. So there's like mission objectives with a level lore, and you try and make a tongue-in-cheek title for the level. Like we're working on one about between graphene and skirmion tornadoes and buckyballs and medical research and all that.
different uses of carbon at the nanoscale.
Yeah, so we call it between the sheets, which is kind of like cheeky, if you will. So,
or like we have one where your objective is to avert the Chernobyl disaster, so I call it Mobile Chernobyl, and it's a pre-Twitter meltdown basically, and so in that level you're trying to remove all the fuel rods out of the reactor, because that's not what they did. In the 80s there, they tried to shove all the control rods back in, and it caused the reactor to overboil. So it's one of those, all right, this is sort of a historic simulator, like here you are in the nuclear reactor. Let's do the right thing this time instead of doing the wrong thing. We already saw what happened when you do the wrong thing. We got one where it's like your job is to invert a singularity. And so you got to get the interferometers charged up and run a few laps. And so it's like, okay, I'm running laps. But then there's also the antimatter guys are down there, because at the edge of singularities, you always have antimaterial emissions, like the virtual particles canceling out with actual particles and what have you. And so there's always that little bit of exhaust from a singularity. But your job is to charge up this device that interferes with the boundary conditions of the singularity and invert it until it starts emitting light again. And but you can drive into it and kill yourself if you want. It would totally,
And
sometimes it throws you free.
And we give you little things like if you could figure out the strategy of luring the antimatter at you up the gravity well hump that is contained within, you could send it flying into the singularity, and it'll just end up being captured by the singularity, orbiting around it in all kinds of erratic things, like a moth around a flame.
Yeah, and then we have it just like it gets shredded and explodes, and then there's tons of. We just have the entire chamber is just all these different particles. Neutrinos are flying out, all kinds of antimatter, little collectible particles as well. It's just like the whole smorgasbord, when you disrupt them. So we're going through and like modeling all these systems like that in such a way that it's like we're just trying to like gamify this subject, because it's one of those things where it's super cool, like that you can take something and go like, all right, we're moving 0.9 times the speed of light, guess what happens? And like all that work that they're doing with like the Hadron Collider or these thorium reactors that people are starting to get back into using, or like some of these old scenarios like the Chernobyl incident, or one of the things that I want to do for like a multiplayer level, based on the singularity one where we're talking about, because it's like you have like a spherical dome, and then there's the part where there's the gravity well in the middle, and so the singularity is kind of floating in this little containment. So I wanted to do like an anti-King of the Hill, where it's like you have to be on the mound, but the singularity is always trying to draw everybody in and destroy them. So it's sort of like, okay, well, who can stay on the edge of the mound for longest, because you can't actually be in the middle. And so it's like anti-King of the Hill, because like nobody really wants to be there, but you have to be there, and you're competing to be there, and it's like,
yeah, and
it's
if you make
risk
it like
life and
bumper
limb.
cars, then you go around and collect a lot of weight, so that you can drive at the guys who think that they're owning the edge of the hill and drive them into the singularity.
Yeah, and you bump them in like you would in Mario Kart, like Mario bumps like.
And it's last man on whatever team standing. You know,
Stuff like that.
as soon as you eliminate all the guys on one team, the other team's declared the winner.
Right. You know, and then you
So
got.
you could do that with player versus player up to battle royale level.
Yeah,
you know?
and then we had another one we were thinking about is they use in order to test the properties of materials at extremely high pressures like gigapascals and stuff like that. They've been using this thing called a diamond anvil, and it's one of the ways that you can like force, you know, like hydrogen to become liquid metallic in nature, because you really have to compress. Like the inside of Jupiter, you can get effects like that, but that basically means it's pretty hard to do it on Earth. And so like, I was thinking like a diamond anvil type one, where it's like you try to get something into the middle of the level where the actual receptacle is, and then the whole place goes and like hits it super hard, and then you could have it like crush an atom and get some kind of effect, or you could have it like crush another player and you get the kill, and they could explode and all their particles could go flying everywhere. You could shatter them. I wanted to do something like that for like a multiplayer level, because then it's like somebody's gonna get forced into the diamond anvil and it goes. So I think that would be fun, like a fun punctuation mark in the middle of something like that, or
Like a hazards level.
yeah, or like you were talking about. We wanted to do the derby one, where it's like that way, because of the particle bonuses. I digressed earlier. Like in the derby level, if you had team on team, or it's like say you had 5-on-5, you only need one guy to lap the other team and get 3 points. And so you'd have to lap them several times, and there's no speed cap when you're collecting electrons in Cyclotronica. So it's this idea like, if one of our teammates can get a whole bunch of electrons and we can just keep everybody else off of them, then we'll get those lap points, because they'll be going so much faster than the other team.
Yeah.
So it's this idea where like everybody else will be like trying to cover them and use the science gun, while they just get as many blue marbles as they can and don't look back.
Right, and generally, we got a lot of jump ramp emitters, and they're triggered when you hit the jump ramp.
So you go over.
Whoever hits the jump ramp first, unless they got a close follower, they're the only ones that are going to pick up those particles.
Yeah.
So it pays to keep people out front, especially at the beginning of a big derby track like that.
Yeah.
And so that would lead to all kinds of like real cool gameplay, because it's quasi racing, but it's also like roller derby.
Yeah.
Where you'd let the little 88-pound skinny mini Miller get out ahead of all the thing, and all the big beefy women in the back would like be knocking everybody on their ass with their elbows and stuff like that.
And it works. It's a team effort, and you just that way like you have somebody focus on getting the win, and then you have everybody else covering them. So that's one kind of. I was thinking about like a Crucible / Hungry Hippos kind of bit, where it's like the atoms are being dropped in, and there's different like goal areas for like individual players, or if we had team faction, everybody has like a goal area, and you're trying to get the atom into your goal so that you can like funnel it into your containment or whatever, and then you would get scored based on like how heavy is that isotope, what is it, what's the particle count. But that doesn't mean they're all safe to handle, and so if they come in and they're shooting at you and your job is to put them away, you still got to put them away, and if you destroy them, you don't get the atom point. So it's like you may be equipped with weapons.
That's a case where we could bring in lasers,
yeah,
where we fire beams of hot photons at it, and what it does is it basically pushes it.
Yeah.
Or you can, like they do with pulse lasers, where you hit it, not hit it, and it drops the temperature until it freezes.
Yeah,
because we could tell the particle systems inside to just slowly.
Yeah, we could just slow them down.
Scale down on them.
So we got a bunch of stuff like that. There's just so much we want to implement. I figured at this point in the conversation, you probably like this is a big project. One of the things for us is like we've just been making ends meet. I mean, obviously, pandemic's nuts. We're artists. That makes everything extra weird. So, and I'm a massage therapist on the side, but it's kind of like, I mean, now everybody behaves. It's all, the clean room protocol is really stressful. I don't really work for the general public anymore. I still have my private clients, but this is life, and we've just been kind of doing this project on the side for a couple years, but in order to get really serious about it and make this a multiplayer experience, that's going to be the hardest part of development, is getting an efficient headless server and like making all that stuff work over an internet connection. And it's definitely a new area for me, because I'm new to coding in general, and the way we're going to need to do the networking and stuff, he's going to have to hit the books too, and we have to have time and funding to hit the books. And so we figured we'd just kind of put this out there. This is what we're doing. It's a game about nuclear physics where you are a little robot and you're racing around.
It's on Steam already.
Yeah,
so
we're
you
out.
Can purchase it. You can go there and
$10
purchase it, and it'd be helpful if you kind of viralize it amongst your community, because
we're halfway there.
Game. So, and we're going to be updating it every time we get a concept finished. And the fact of the matter is, we've got all the framework done, and I've atomized the component system. So basically, you've got every kind of little thing that you can do with physics or atomic transformations as a little component widget. You
or
drop
mission
it on,
triggers.
Yeah, mission triggers. We've standardized a lot of things, because a lot of things we learned over the thing. It's these basic parameters, so that you put a few Boolean switches on it, you don't need anything but one emitter. And it'll do shotgun blast, linear emitting, single shot, array emissions, and then you just load it up with the ammo by some check boxes and pulling some counter sliders at the beginning, and it'll emit same, pairing, all three different kinds, or even like some of the other particles that aren't part of the basic collection system that you trade for the elemental inventory.
So where we're at now is we've got a single player campaign, we've got a custom track builder, we've got the isotope chamber that lets you just arbitrarily spawn and play with atoms and bombard them with particles or anti-particles out of the guns that are set up in the chamber. So we got a couple of things like that, and that showcases like the mission system. It showcases like the way that we build levels, and we've got a bunch more assets in the background too. And then it also just shows the way the atom system actually works. And so the next thing that we're going to do is I've got to come up with a lot of different perks and abilities that are going to correspond to the 118 elements in the periodic table. And so like an easy example would be when you turn on the helium in your catalog during gameplay, you would start to float like a balloon, because generally the cycle sticks to walls, so that means like you don't fly. And so being able to just floating up is kind of actually like a mobility bonus, and that way you can get into doing things like secret areas, bonus collectibles, stuff that's typically out of reach, and so it allows you to like use more of the space in Toto, and it gives you like a different way to move. Like maybe just staying off of the floor is all you need to do, so you turn on the helium effect for a minute. Or like with the higher, like super heavy elements, I'm thinking like multi-stage cluster bombs where they go through their entire decay sequence, shooting out like neutrinos and shockwave force.
And part of that is figuring out a proper user interface system, so you don't have to give them a manual to play the game. It should be intuitive. So how do they know that they get these perks and stuff like that? Although we do have atom lore, so every time you collect an atom and exchange it, it gives you the full data about it, and a little tongue-in-cheek snide remark about the atom and its personality
or when
properties.
it was discovered. But that stuff is that's like some of it's data and some of it's storytelling, and neither of those really cover the idea that we're going to ascribe abilities to each of the elements. And so that system, I'm thinking we probably go in the direction of like a favorites wheel, because once you got like 8 or 10 picked out of the 118, we're going to make a lot of different types of effect, but you'll know what you want, and you can spend enough time and like switch it around in the catalog. So we're going to take that catalog and basically turn it into an elemental spell book, but we're talking periodic table of elemental spell book.
Yeah, and we got a card game based on this as well, and it's kind of like Magic the Gathering, if you will, but Not quite, because it's based on,
A little bit cribbage too. You know, you got the little
yeah, and war and
Boggle.
crazy eights and spades. All
boggle, because you get the little dice and you go, and then that gives you points, but they're d20s, and so we have like a little cyclotron wheel where you get your cribbage pegs, and then you get dealt cards out of the element deck, and you get dealt cards out of the action deck, and so it's kind of like, can I steal somebody's card by valence? Can I steal somebody's card using a device from my action cards? Like, do I need to discard? Like, is it safe for me to reveal this yet? Do I think somebody's going to take it from me by other means? When can I drop stuff? And you try to get out, like you would in Gin Rummy, and so it's this idea, like, you don't want to get left holding the cards because they get deducted from your inventory. So we have this, and it can be done on like an iPad or mobile, and there's different.
Yeah.
That's like a whole other platform, but it's also like it draws on the exact same Atom system. We just come up with a few different rules to sort of card gamify it.
Yeah, and we'd like to actually make the physical tabletop game of it, at some point.
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea how it would look.
We've got it all ready for the printer and the rule book and stuff like that. We just need a few little widgets.
So there's different things we're doing. We've got this. Cyclotronica is sort of, it's a gaming system we're kind of building up around this theme, and there's different aspects of it. There's mini games, there's custom tracks, there's the campaign, there's going to be multiplayer if we can, God willing, there's going to be multiplayer, and then there's also like the card game side of it, which just it puts all this stuff in front of people in a way that makes it fun, instead of just going like, oh, here's a big giant chart full of headachy stuff that like, oh wow, these all have different properties.
Or like in the bombardment chamber, for each one of the interactions that happens when you're firing the neutrons or the anti-neutrons and you're causing any kind of transformation, all that's scrolling by in proper scientific notation. So if you're like a fourth year nuclear science major, you're going to look at the side and you're going to be able to read that and understand the interactions, and you won't have to spend billions of dollars inside a big metal apparatus with government looking over your shoulder to play with atoms.
So that's fun, and they have real half-lives, so you can leave the game running for 1 million years and may never get that bismuth to double beta decay. And that's your fault. You should have hit the button to fire the antiparticles at it, because, you can, in a heartbeat, you can change it if you want. But they're real half-lives. And because they're real half-lives, that means that when it gets to the time, it actually flips a coin to decide whether it's going to decay or not. So, sometimes something that's only supposed to last a fraction of a second happens to flip tails 5 times in a row, and you get to see it for a couple seconds. So, there's always that little element of randomness to it, even though, we wanted to lock it to certain rules. So that's basically what we're trying to do. So we're looking for people's commentary, we're looking for people's interest, we're looking for people's financial support to a modest degree, so we just have time to focus. Rent for a couple months would get us pretty far.
Yeah.
We don't have big crazy houses or anything. You can see we're out here in the woods chilling. I mean, I don't need a lot to live, and so for me to be able to spend a few months just focusing on getting the rest of this stuff done, free and clear, or having to take silly phone calls from other people that distract me from the work, that would be excellent. That'd be really excellent.
Yeah.
Then we could bring the rest of this prospectus to you.
I don't know how many are just gamers or game developers, but if you're interested, we could start releasing small component packs of scripts that we've written that you could kind of mix and match for lifetime and torsion fields and trigger and collision objects using drag and drop Unity events and stuff like that, so it can be set up easily for artists.
To kind of bring it also into another context, I used to play StarCraft a lot back before it was all actions per minute, esport. I don't deal with that, it's too stressful. StarCraft, though, had an amazing map editor, and one of the things that I learned when I was a 12-year-old kid was that there are these invisible things called triggers, and they affect how the mission works. So in a lot of that time that I spent with him, before I was good at coding, I asked him to build me a bunch of different analogs of mission triggering systems that I was familiar with using from modding other games and making my own custom levels. So a lot of that stuff that we put together is extremely utilitarian, and it's really good for that, where it's You can just use it as part of a gaming event system, and it allows you to like. It's very freeform. But that's what I had him set up for me, was a bunch of different stuff like that, so I could basically get back to just game modding again. And
and I've been at this since early 2010, and basically people throw like ideas at me, and I give them back a system that when I'm gone, they could play with all the sliders and the interfaces that I give them, and tweak the thing all down the road and back, you know. So, and I know how to write systems for artists because I'm an artist myself, and like when I code something, I want to be able to use it in more than one place, you know. And I'm not a Microsoft trained coder. I'm what I would call a backyard hot rod mechanic. I write real compact, high performance code that's adheres to like the way Unity started writing things in its early documentation. And I learned that, you know, certain things take a lot of pedal to the metal instructions, and certain things don't. So any decision making, you try and use as few instruction sets as possible, and then you pack all your punch in the methods that it triggers, so it becomes like a switchboard. And you can set that up where you set up the switchboard methods, if you will, and throw a bunch of the trigger and collision components down, drag that particular component in there, and start triggering methods in it. And you know,
yeah, just put your colliders around, click the is trigger box. But yeah, anybody that's in Unity, we have a lot of interesting stuff. So I mean, there's different ways we can give back to people if they contribute to the project. And so yeah, they're like, one of those could be asset packs and different stuff like that. We're pretty open to different things. We make stuff too, so it's kind of, we have our hands in many different pies. So so we'll try to come up with some more ideas about that, but that kind of stuff is available to the developer community in general as we go forward. These are things that we think are generally useful for anybody who's creating games, so we can give that kind of stuff back to people too.
And there's a lot of aspiring game developers, you know, that would like to design games. They thought they were good at, like him with the modding and stuff like that. So we could kind of try and take you through that journey too, of learning, okay, I know I can do this, but then running into the various problems and how they were solved for level balancing.
Vector 3 dot forward, not transform dot forward, I'm telling you. So, I was so confused for like, golly. I don't remember what you left it in there, but oh my god, I was so confused about that for the longest time. I don't know what's going on in there. My calculus teacher,
you got to watch whether you're working in a relative or in a world.
My calculus teacher was a drunk in 11th grade, so I wouldn't have known the code was wrong. I don't know the matrix transform. What are you talking about? My teacher had a hangover. Oh, jeez. I don't know. I missed that whole, the trigger versions.
I was too busy in math class drawing like the latest Marvel Submariner issue #1 thing, or Spider-Man, and I was going, what the hell do I need to know about triangles for? I'm not a sailor. You know, and actually, if you had told me I could have made Spider-Man swinging around, I'd have kept that math teacher there till 9 o'clock at night till I understood like triangles and vectors and all.
Every
that.
Triangle is a love triangle when you're Pythagoras.
Okay.
Okay.
On that note,
yeah. So yeah, obviously that's what's going on. This is kind of our opening volley to on the PR front. So the game's already out.
Tune in. And we'll chat.
The game's literally already out. Look up Cyclotronica on Steam. Like, it's there, so I know there's a lot of people.
Below.
Yeah. There's a lot of people on Patreon who are, like, taking your money and they're not delivering the product yet. Ours is already out.
Yeah,
we're
help us make it bigger and better.
That's all. All right, love you. Thanks. Bye-bye.